What Matters goes global. We are sitting here in Italy, lovely Verona in Italy, a nice 30-degree day outside with the lovely Alice Maggio. Thank you for hosting us. Well, you're actually hosting us on the What Matters podcast, so very much appreciate. First thing that the YouTube viewers will notice is that Nick is not with us. He's back training hard for Masters Nationals, I think, Dylan.
Yeah, he's doing a training block at the minute, I think, in altitude potentially.
Yeah, potentially.
Unfortunately, our budget couldn't allow 3 people to come to Italy, so it was just you and I.
Yeah, the What Matters podcast budget of $0, negative whatever the software costs, $500 or something. No, really, really exciting podcast today. It would have been great to have Nick on here, but due to technical issues, couldn't do so. But he has a lot of experience in coaching in the stuff that we're going to talk about today. We have Alice, who is a global leader here in all things women's physiology, sports science, especially a lot of research around overtraining, Red S, training female endurance athletes and that sort of thing. So welcome to What Matters, Alice.
Hi guys. Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. And it has been really fun to have you here. And happy to speak about whatever you want about this topic.
Awesome. No, I think we'll get a lot of good listeners listening to this that will get a lot out of it, both men and women. Why don't you explain sort of how you got it, your journey into sport and like your journey into sports science and studying and researching into how you are now?
Yeah, sure. So my background comes from triathlon. So I was a triathlete and then I went into sports science degree and I did my master and my bachelor and my master degree in Verona, Italy. And actually I was always passionate about endurance in general and I felt it like my path. And during my master, I had the opportunity to go abroad. So I went to Germany for an Erasmus, like normal Erasmus. And there I got to meet one professor who was like researching around female, which for me was something new. I never heard it, even especially being like an athlete myself. So I thought, okay, that's really interesting. And he was looking mainly into soccer and how menstrual cycle affect like performance in team sport. But still we start to speak about hormone fluctuation and the difference between male and the female. And that's, it was captivating my interest. And from there, I moved to, like, during the second year of my master, I did a research project. I conduct a research project in Ghent, Belgium, at Ghent University with the endurance sport research team there. And it was really nice experience. I was in the lab collecting data about how, like, training load, internal and external training load change based on menstrual cycle phase. So it was my real first experience into research. And there from there, I thought research was my main interest in this area. So I applied for a PhD in Australia, actually your hometown. And I got the scholarship at Duke University for researching into how different training session could affect like stressful factor into female and looking at, again, menstrual cycle phase differences and female specificity. So I was in Melbourne for some months, but something happened in my mind and I actually decided that I felt more inclined into build relationship directly with athletes and work into the field and make the most impact as possible in the field. I felt that was the need more than being in the lab and researching behind the scenes. So from there I just went into coaching and I'm currently coaching pro triathletes and some under 23 cyclists, girl and male. And I'm based in Verona in Italy right now, working and collaborating with a lab here. We conduct a physiological test and we are like different endurance coaches working around endurance from cyclists, triathlon. So that's me. So now I'm actually focusing on, coaching. So performance drive, but also trying to put into practice what was my background into RED-S prevention, specifically both males and females, because it's not only for females, and trying to make athletes aware of how our physiology and how it works.
Yeah. And you're saying firstly, very accomplished career for someone who's been going sort of full gas at it for the last few years. And we had the pleasure of meeting you in Australia with some work that we were doing. And now to come all the way over to the other side of the world and see your lab and how you operate has been really cool. I think you'll agree, Dylan, as well.
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's been really cool. And on that sort of research into specifically women's physiology around endurance training, we were talking a bit off air before about how there was such a gap in the literature, not only in sports science, but also just medicine in general. Like, was it 6% of the literature out there was on a female specific cohort rather than just extrapolating that from testing men and that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's definitely took my attention when I was studying it and build the proposal for the first research project. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Yeah, we don't really have data about female, and like research science, like science has been done exactly like for the most of the cases into males, and only 6% of sports science research strictly is based on female subject only. So you were true, but in general it's come from a cultural dynamics that female were not included into science because they were more complicated from the physiological point of view because of the menstrual cycle. Maybe it's something like you cannot standardize really into research, so that's why we were actually excluded from even medical science.
Which is also exactly why it probably needs to be studied, because it is so different to male physiology. And a lot of the work that you do now is around that, I suppose. So definitely keen to talk more on that today. But why don't you sort of explain to the listeners, I guess, from a basic point of view, like the female specific physiology around cycling and triathlon and how that sort of links in with the menstrual cycle and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I feel like my main role when I'm speaking with athletes, and we also sometimes do sessions speaking and explaining how the menstrual cycle works and what are our different. We also, I forgot to mention, of course, we are collaborating with Meridian team. So we also had like this meeting explaining to the girls how we are made and how we function. So I feel like the main part of the job is like, as a RED-S consultant or menstrual cycle in general, is more like making athletes aware of how it works and how the menstrual cycle works, why we have menstrual cycle and why we should have it and why we should track it. So,
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of, you guys can speak to this as well, with females that we coach, there probably in the past was a bit more taboo around discussing this sort of topic, especially as male coaches, and also, getting athletes that are comfortable to share that sort of information of tracking menstrual cycle, relating it back to performance, maybe understanding how different times during that menstrual cycle will elicit different things in a training block, like feeling differently or responding differently to training and that sort of thing. So I think, the work that you're doing is really great. And the fact that we can have discussions like this on the podcast or in the field or with athletes that we coach is really important. And I think, a lot of people are going to hopefully get a lot out of this, both male riders and female riders as well, because a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is also applicable to male riders around like overtraining and that sort of thing as well, energy availability, etc. I think how we should probably best tackle this is, maybe just explaining training around the different stages of the menstrual cycle, and then we can kind of get more into tracking it, the importance of tracking it, and the importance of knowing where you're at in a menstrual cycle as an athlete. After that, we'll get a bit more into specifically overtraining, RED-S, energy availability, and that sort of thing. And then the real crux of it will be around the prevention, recognition, and management of RED-S in sport. So if you're happy to kind of talk about that, then
So another things it need to be highlighted is like, we don't only have like a low research amount around female, but also the quality that has been done in research female, because it was a new topic, new area, was especially at the beginning not really high quality studies. That's because tracking the menstrual cycle physiologically take a lot of effort from a research point of view, because you like the gold standard, because now luckily many researchers and researchers team are publishing gold standard into female physiology. So we can go and into literature and find like actual results that you can trust on. But at the beginning it was like more just tracking them into calendar and assuming that it was a regular menstrual cycle, or assuming that, or maybe not taking into consideration contraceptive use or other problematics. So yeah, that's also another thing that it's good to know. But luckily now, like big research team are like telling what's the rule on and the gold standard to follow. So that's nice. And yeah, I think we need to be aware that it's a complex system because it's not really mathematical one. I like to start saying like just telling how the menstrual cycle works. So you can just divide it into different phases. So when we speak about menstrual cycle, it's not like menstruation itself, but it's considering all the months. So from the day 1 to the day 28, if it's like really regular, but again, from 25 to 32 days is still considered, 35 days is still considered physiological menstrual cycle. So it doesn't need to be like strictly 28 days. And the day 1 usually start from menstruation. So day 1 of menstruation, like first day of menstruation is day 1 of the menstrual cycle. And then from there you start counting, and you can divide it into different phases, which usually is follicular phase, ovulation, luteal phase, and then you start over again. You can even, in research, you can divide it even in more phases depending on how specific you want to be. And so it's also nice to know that everything comes from like a genetic and chromosome expression. So the difference between males and females start from when we are born, actually. And then during puberty, we have this big differentiation into hormone profiles. So we start from males that have like daily fluctuation of testosterone, and while female has this monthly fluctuation of 2 main hormones, which are estrogen and progesterone mainly. So that's the 2 hormones that allow us to have like female body. We are able to have pregnancy, and that's why we also have menstruation, of course. So starting from the first phase, we have menstruation, like it lasts like around 6 days. And then the hormone level are quite low and stable, and estrogen start to build up. And also another hormone come into play, that is luteinizing hormone that trigger ovulation when it happens. So I will explain it a bit better later. So we should have ovulation like between day 12 and 16 of the menstrual cycle. Then estrogen goes down, and estrogen actually like after estrogen go down, we have like an increase in progesterone, which is during the luteal phase, and it's when the endometrial line is building up. So ovulation, that's mean we have like release of eggs that is ready to have a potential pregnancy. And then when endometrial lining start to build up again is when progesterone is high. And if we don't have an actual like implantation or pregnancy, we start over again and we have menstruation. And menstruation is actually when the lining of the uterus is folding down and we have bleeding. So that's how it works. Also a lot related to how we should monitor the menstrual cycle, or of what we need to be aware is that not every cycle is ovulatory. So that's mean not every menstrual cycle has a spike in progesterone. So if estrogen and progesterone, which this is the fact, are impacted of a lot of our systems, then when we don't have ovulation, we don't have the effect of progesterone. So even from now, you can understand that it's really difficult to, for example, considering to train based on the menstrual cycle phase, because it's really flexible and you need to know the physiology behind. And it's also really difficult to stick with some phases, especially if you don't know if it's happening or not. So I think like science says between 4 and 6 menstrual cycle during a year are not non-ovulatory. So that's mean you don't have the spike in progesterone and the effect of progesterone. So it's quite complex.
You see a lot of coaching and research and that sort of thing on training specifically, like females training specifically around a menstrual cycle. But then, we were speaking a bit off air as to the issues with that being, that they're so they're not the same each menstrual cycle, but also then the fact that the race calendar is the race calendar regardless of where you are in a menstrual cycle. And also, yeah, if you just treat it like every 28-day block, then there's no point in actually training to it. Have you had any experience in coaching or training around a menstrual cycle before that research came out, or?
Not really.
Yeah.
No, because it's really difficult. Like, it's not really feasible in the field, as you can confirm, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
For me, it's more about, again, making athletes aware of what's happening, tracking their symptoms, and knowing that symptoms can be related to some specific phase. And so it's more about that than, like, it's not about training stimulus.
Yeah.
Because these two hormones are the one affecting like muscles, brain, many different systems, because hormones are like going everywhere in our body. But also looking at the possible effect of this hormone in, I don't know, carbohydrate metabolism or VO2 max, then you don't really see differences. And even literature concludes that it doesn't really make sense to train based on the menstrual cycle.
Yeah. So it's more about understanding that if there's some adverse symptoms with the menstrual cycle, it's knowing that might happen, as opposed to having that happen and thinking that maybe it's training that's causing that. If you've got that historical data previously, you can be a bit more relaxed around it and be like, okay, this is normal and this is sort of what I've had in the past and I can expect it, as opposed to maybe assuming that it's training or something else that's causing certain things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What might be some examples of symptoms that riders might report back where you can then say, well, it's actually because you're at this part of the menstrual cycle rather than necessarily training related?
So another point of not considering general prescription about menstrual cycle is that symptoms are really subjective. And so it's really, you can have a general idea on what can happen based on the effect of hormones. So maybe during bleeding, you have to, of course, maybe you can have like lower iron level as a female, or you can feel like low energy. And during ovulation, maybe you feel like crazy well and you can push hard on the bike, doing like intensity and strength really well. And then usually during luteal phase, when progesterone gets high, you feel like more fatigued, even from a cardiovascular point of view, cardiovascular strain. And that's maybe some back pain and some cramps start to arrive. And during menstruation, another big area is like gastrointestinal symptoms. So maybe you digest lower, you are, not feeling really good in digesting food and fueling during training. So it's also something you can consider. But it's really subjective. That's why, I agree with Dylan. That's if you have the historical, like if you start with a girl, coaching one girl and tracking the menstrual cycle in few months, you can have an idea on how she feels. I mean, she can feel always good. It's not always the case that she needs to have like specific or bad symptoms around, but at least you know where they can come from. And the athletes is, okay, I'm not feeling bad because I'm training not good or because I'm not feeling good, but maybe because my menstrual cycle is coming in 3 days. So and then there is also the mood change that is a big
the psychological factor of training and that sort of thing. Around the different phases in the cycle.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Mood change a lot.
I've seen a little bit of research around, like, you've explained really well why you wouldn't train specifically to the menstrual cycle in terms of when to structure rest and that sort of thing and when to progressively overload. But there is a lot, like you were saying, during ovulation, like to the glycogen metabolism is slightly different, and to training like more like using a lot better carbohydrate and doing better intensity during that part of the menstrual cycle. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's supposed to be thanks to this estrogen role, because estrogen, it seems to spare glycogen reserve and it helps to use it, while progesterone, it seems to like do the opposite. But again, so that's why also you feel good during ovulation. That's one factor. And then there is one neuromuscular factor, because estrogen is really included into muscular metabolism. So it helps in the contraction of the muscles. So that's also, that can give you better feelings. And around that, maybe I should mention before, but maybe if some girls have like really bad cramps before the menstrual cycle or during the menstrual cycle, it can be useful for a coach to know it. So maybe in that case, you can train based on the menstrual cycle, but that's mean maybe you avoid really high intensity or strong effort or testing or whatever during that days. And the girls feel comfortable to speak with you and to say, okay, maybe we participated for 1 week or whatever, or a few days, because maybe it lasts like a few days. So, yeah.
What do you think the biggest barriers are in female athletes feeling comfortable in sharing that information with coaches?
Yeah, there were kind of a lot of studies looking into questionnaire and how they feel, like how athletes feel about speaking with it. And yeah, I actually experienced it personally also because I had really bad cramps and really bad symptoms from menstrual cycle, and I couldn't training, and as a athlete you had to swim, and I was like trying to invent something around excuses and saying, oh, maybe I have fever or maybe I cannot swim. So I think luckily the barrier is going down to speak with like men's coaches. And of course, if we look at like sport performance, we have many more male coaches compared to females, unluckily. But so no, that's good. But I think like it's really up to the coach to open up the discussion and like let the athletes feel comfortable to speak about. And when there is a discussion, I think it's really like game changer, especially because, and one also the reason that bring me into this area, like athletes are really working with their body, so they should know what's going on and they should be like open up to speak. They should feel free to open and speak about what's happening with their body. So I think it's a taboo that should like go.
I completely agree. So I definitely get, I'd say at least 90% of my female athletes to track it as a metric on Training Peaks. But I also feel like I've done a really good job in building rapport with them when they feel like comfortable enough to share that with me. I know you're the same as well, Dylan. Like there definitely is that barrier between like as a male coach coaching female athletes that some people feel like they can't. I think it's just about building rapport and that sort of thing, and then doing things like this as well. But
I think
it's super important, and it's the more information a coach has, the better. It's no different to knowing their work or school schedule or their what type of athlete they are, if they have a high critical power, if they like it's all just metrics that can help performance.
Sometimes I feel really torn between the two. It's like, well, maybe I need to build rapport first so they feel comfortable, but at the same time, if you were to intake a female athlete, maybe it's just having an open discussion straight away. And it's like, well, if it's already something that we talked about before we've built rapport, then it seems like it's an okay conversation. Like I'll sometimes go between the two. It's like, I'm not sure
what the athlete would prefer. Obviously, we would prefer to know, but then.
Yeah, exactly. How's the athlete going to,
I think,
are they going to feel around that in an intake call, for example, or something like that? So it's a little bit challenging.
There's potentially also the fact that athletes don't know that male coaches have the knowledge base to use that information well. Like rather than just saying, oh, like I got my period last week, it was perfectly regular or irregular, and they're like, okay, cool. Like to actually know what that means and the importance, which we'll get into next, the importance of actually tracking a menstrual cycle as an elite athlete and someone who's, working super hard and burning so many kilojoules. But I think, it's definitely getting better, which is good.
So you just spoke about how sometimes during the menstrual phase, we could have some adverse symptoms like cramping and that kind of thing. And we spoke off air beforehand that sometimes doctors might prescribe contraception or something like this purely to mitigate those symptoms. From a performance and a health perspective, what do you think are the pros and cons of that?
Yeah, sure. So again, I have many calls when I do the consult for triathletes or cyclists about or they are using already contraceptive or they have to start using contraceptives. And it's a bit sad, but the question is always, why should I use it or not? So that's again something we are missing. So explain what's going on in our body and why we should take a decision or not, in my opinion. But so I can start from how oral or contraceptive in general works. So we have many different types of contraceptive. Oral contraceptive are the pills. So we have like patches or like local uterus contraceptives as well. And the main two like areas are hormonal or not hormonal. But yeah, generally we are using oral contraceptives and hormonal oral contraceptives. So the pills. What is happening is like the pills is like suppressing the signal and our ability to produce hormone from an endogenous point of view, and it gives you hormonal from an exogenous point of view. So it's like dictating how much hormone do you have during the month, which usually is like low level and quite stable. So it's stop your fluctuation, and yeah, your like hypothalamus and your brain and ovarian axis is not working anymore. So it's really up to the pills you are taking. So if we go to like heavy symptoms, that's there, because even really heavy symptoms should be considered depending on how heavy it is. Like science says, if symptoms doesn't allow you to have like your routine activity, it should be a really medical problem that you should assess. But we don't have many info on it on how to do. You can work with some kind of anti-inflammatory integration, but you should discuss it with the doctor. If it's like heavy symptoms that you cannot training or it can impact your races, then it's the only area where I could really consider oral contraceptives, because of course you are an athlete and you need to perform. Until we are getting to the point where we have more info about symptoms and how to manage it. It also has been seen that non-ovulatory menstrual cycle can lead you to like heavy bleeding and really bad symptoms. So again, it's about how regular is your menstrual cycle. So yeah, it comes down to tracking it and be sure that everything is going fine. And then later we can see why you are missing your menstrual cycle and what can be the cause. But yeah, coming back to oral contraceptive pill, if it's more for symptoms, yeah, I think it should be taken into account. And then, yeah, even when you start it, you have to be aware that it can take some time to adapt to your body, and probably some gynecologists give you like many types to try and see what fits you better, because they have some symptoms as well or drawbacks. But yeah, and if it's more like because you are missing your menstrual cycle and you have contraceptive to come back to like some bleeding, that's not a physiological menstrual cycle, it's just bleeding, and it's when you stop the pills and you have some bleeding and you start it again. So it's more covering the cause of a problem and not going through what the causes here are and assessing them.
Yeah. So like a band-aid fix rather than the actual addressing the root cause and that sort of thing. Yeah. And in terms of, you say like, taking an oral contraceptive or something like that, suppressing and stabilizing hormones over the whole course of a normal menstrual cycle, is the main reason that you're against that because of the inability to track that and then infer information from that, or because of the actual health in general?
So no, it's not about really health, because it's something you can take, and it like another thought from like our general thought as female was like, I remember if you take the oral contraceptive, you will not be able to have pregnancy in the future, which is kind of not true.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's more about not working with your real physiology. And when it comes to a lot of hours training and managing your caloric intake, I think not having menstrual cycle as a feedback that everything is going well and your body is functioning well, you're adapting well, it's a big limit.
Yeah, it's a limiting factor to actually just like sort of like not having a power meter or something on your bike, like you know, like an extra piece of data that's actually really biologically important.
Yeah, definitely. And it's important to know that if you're taking oral contraceptive, there is no sense to track your menstrual cycle because it's not always clear, I think.
Yeah. And takes time after if you stop it to renormalize.
Yeah,
and that sort of thing.
It depends on how long did you take it, but it can take months, like 4 or 6 months.
Yeah.
To have like normal physiological menstrual cycle. And with physiological menstrual cycle, I mean a cycle that has ovulation at one point.
Yeah.
So there is also like easy way to track ovulation at home, also from coaches to prescribe and just to have some feedback on it. They are like normal strips that you can use home. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I guess we should press on due to being late for dinner. But the importance of tracking a menstrual cycle as an elite athlete, like, and having that biological marker, Why is that so important to track, in your opinion? And then from there, we'll go on to the last sort of part about reg and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I like that you compare it with power meter, because I think when you start coaching an athlete, from my experience, but I think it's your experience where you can confirm, but when you ask information about him, like how much are you training, or how are you training, like many different questions, you do like the first interview with the athletes, then you should ask to a female athlete, do you have your menstrual cycle, how you manage it, and be aware of what is the starting point, like if she has it, if she hasn't, or if she's using her contraceptive or not, so you know how to move through his program as well. And of course, if she doesn't have it, I think you have some problem to assess. And
If she doesn't have a menstrual cycle.
Yeah. So what was the question again?
So for example, in the scenario where they miss a menstrual cycle due to any number of factors, biologically as a cycling coach, why is that important to know?
Yeah. So when you don't have your menstrual cycle, that's like, regardless how fit you are, that's a sign that your body is going through some big stress. And that can come from or training too much. Stress in general, which can overlap with overtraining or overreaching, like not good recovery, not enough sleep, or not managing well your training stimulus, or that is the biggest area, like not feeling right. So if you have like low energy availability compared to, so like your energy intake is not matching your caloric expenditure, then is where your system, like your, again, hypothalamus, ovaries axis, is saying, okay, we have not enough energy to sustain our system. We cannot host a pregnancy, so we stop the menstrual cycle until we are ready again.
Yeah.
So that's how we work.
Yeah. And then, so from a training perspective, do you want to talk a bit more then about like low energy availability and what that is, and then how that can sort of have flow-on effects for other things that could then like be a problem for an athlete training and something that a coach should know about?
Yeah. So I think we can speak about RED-S.
Yeah.
So relative, like it stands for relative energy deficiency in sports.
Yep. And
it's a multifactorial syndrome, and the diagnosis, it's really hard, and you need to go for like, is a diagnosis for exclusion. That's mean you have to delete like other possible factors that bring you to that situation. And it usually comes from, again, a mismatching between energy intake and energy expenditure. And you have many different consequences regarding many different areas. In female athlete, of course, you miss the menstrual cycle. Probably your cortisol is high. You are not sleeping well, and you are not recovering. And in males, you have like lower level of testosterone, and even iron can be not at its best. And from metabolic point of view, you cannot stack really well glycogen anymore. You cannot afford a high intensity effort, and many other factors. So it's really complex.
Yeah.
Yep. So do you think, like, there's obviously the main factors of food intake and output as well, so how much you're training, but is there, what you're saying is that there's actually other factors to consider as well, like sleep and stress around life and that kind of thing, that can also play a major role in potentially getting RED-S?
Yeah, I usually, delete like different, like other possibility around not having menstrual cycle, for example. Like I work mainly with girls that have menstrual dysfunction, and we have to understand, okay, is it coming from how much you are training or somewhere else? So usually first step, you do a gynecologist assessment to see that from a structural point of view, everything is fine. Then you suggest to do blood samples, blood exam, to see like hormonal profile. And it depends, of course, on when and for how long she doesn't have the menstrual cycle. But in that situation, you expect really low hormone level. And other things to consider when you like prescribe hormonal assessment from blood test is like the pulsatility of hormones. It change hour, like 2 hour to 2 hours. So you really need to standardize the same time of the day and the same menstrual phase. So it's is another important thing. And then when it comes, like when you exclude all these things, you can say, okay, how are you training? How are you fueling? And it has been seen that the main role in this is like carbohydrates. So more than caloric intake, it's really important that you match the carbohydrates that you need. And we are, of course, speaking mainly about endurance sports.
Yeah, we were talking yesterday in the car then about how the study where if you don't meet your caloric requirements versus overtraining, and like the group that were missing carbohydrate, even though they had the same amount of calories consumed, it was the group that was missing the carbohydrate that had worse response to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Took longer to
come
out of red
and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, that's because it seems like higher energy expenditure that of course is related to how much hours you do, how many hours you do, and how much you train. It's less stress for luteinizing hormone pulsatility, which is the hormone that's helping to having ovulation, etc. While having less carbohydrates is a higher stress factor.
Yeah.
So it's really from a
metabolic point of view. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, go on.
So if I'm an athlete or even a coach listening to this, when's the time to think maybe I need to investigate whether I've got RED-S or not? Like, what are the major like things that are happening to that athlete at the moment where they need to be like, all right, I need to start investigating this and seeing Alice Maggio to work through it?
Yeah, so I think from the moment you are tracking the menstrual cycle, if she has if she's not using oral contraceptives, maybe the first menstrual cycle is missing. Okay, you start to think, okay, let's see what's happened the next month. If the second month is missing, I would start to investigate. If it's like, even investigate how is the life of the athletes, like in her background, like is she stressed because of, I don't know, uni or other problematics, or is it like not recovering well, not feeling well? So of course, it's something you can track even before it happened, but of course, if it happened, you should like go in that direction.
Yeah.
And if you have like hormonal or like blood test, like from the start of the season with her, you can just start to redo it and have some feedbacks about maybe CPK. I don't know. CPK or cortisol or like inflammatory states, or even bone markers, because I think one thing we miss to say, like when you have this disruption in hormone fluctuation and you don't have your menstrual cycle, the first system that really suffer from it is bone system. And in cyclists, you don't get injury really fast because you don't have impact during the sport, while I work with triathletes as well and they get injured faster. So that's a pro and a cons, because if they get injured faster, you can know better and sooner. You can know sooner the problem. Of course, a stress fracture is not something like really fun to recover from.
Yeah.
But your bone density really go down, and that's because estrogen is not there anymore. And if you go on with cycling, you can be more weak in this sense.
Yeah. And is there anything different for males potentially as well? Like, what are the key factors that you can look at to consider that maybe they're in RED-S?
Yeah, I think with men it's more about testosterone, iron, and how they recover. So it takes more energy in communication, I think.
Yeah.
And making sure they are feeling right.
Yeah. I think it's like you said before, personally, and I know you're similar, Dylan, and Nick also, and yourself. I've had 3 athletes that have come, and now that I now coach, that have either come to me with REDs or have had REDs in the past and that sort of thing. 1 male, 2 females. It is a lot easier to diagnose in the females due to them tracking their menstrual cycle and having those conversations. But in all 3 cases, it's very much a multifactorial thing, like you say. Like, generally speaking, if something's wrong at that level biologically, like there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of like not being able to complete the sessions properly, not recovering from training, like poor performance, really low mood, and possibly things around food, like in their relationship with food and that sort of thing. Like, there's a lot of both in the diagnosis and understanding when something's wrong, and then also on the other side of that, recovering from it. Like, having the support of someone like Alice, as well as a coach, as well as a dietitian, as well as a psychologist, in some cases a gynecologist, like very much building that network of people that can all be on the same page and all communicate really well, sports doctor, etc. I think both in the diagnosis and the recovery from it, it's really important that everything's considered rather than just one.
Yeah, I have a fun story about stress around training that doesn't really comes into training load management or fueling. And another thing you can track actually is weight, because if the girl is or the boy is losing a lot of weight, then it can be a red flag. And I had this girl comes to me and she said, I don't have regular menstrual cycle. What's happening? She looks fine from a like composition point of view. She looked like full of energy, like an athlete. So yeah, we went through a bit of her history because that's what I do usually. And then we did the exam. Her cortisol was crazy. She didn't really have like RED-S symptoms. So we chat a bit and she was going through like last exams of her uni. She was so stressful. She couldn't recover. She was like anxious during all the day because your nervous system play a big role into this. And that's also why it's really important to manage in like intensity training in general, like in endurance, because of course you need to recover also from a nervous system point of view. So when she finished everything, she had her menstrual cycle back.
After the uni finish. It's crazy.
Yeah. So it's also important to say, okay, this is not RED-S. Not everything is a problem around this area.
Yeah.
I don't want to panic girl about this area. It's just really important to know what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And similarly, we were talking before that people can jump to just stop training immediately when that's not always the best thing as well. Like if there's a problem, you can't just like sit there and do nothing as an athlete for months and months and expect that that's going to fix the problem as well if there's other factors.
Yeah, I think you need to really be aware of the step you're taking and what should work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, in that scenario that you spoke about just before, it's, if you had just gone down the rabbit hole, if this is RED-S and that kind of thing, it's probably just adding stress and making the problem worse if you had just early diagnosed it and that kind of thing. So it's really, like you said, it's super important to probably get the right people in and not just sort of diagnose yourself, to try and venture out and find the right people. And then, second, just sort of be a bit open-minded around it and not just pigeonhole things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think open discussion is a game changer here.
Yeah. It's the same with that. Funnily enough, it ends up being the same as every aspect of performance. Good communication with the athlete and between the coach is the first step. So
yeah, that's what's happened at the highest level. So why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we should start to wrap up because getting pretty keen for a fresh Italian piece so that you've promised us. But I guess to wrap up, if you had advice for people listening around everything we've discussed today, what would your advice be?
Yeah, I think again, like practical things like tracking menstrual cycles, speaking with athletes. And one thing I really care about is the step you take when you are coming back from RED-S, or just be sure what you are doing and why you're doing. So in this scenario, it's really important that, you probably need to reduce a bit the volume, see some specialists, talk with your coach. And I think from a hormonal point of view, strength has a big role in this, in general, in female performance, but especially coming back from RED-S and not really like taking care of your fueling, of course. And you need to be patient. Of course, it really depends on how severe was like the RED-S situation. But I think if girls find coaches like you open mind that they can, then it's easier to go through any kind of problem, because I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, for sure. Find a good coach. Good advice. Awesome. Alice, thank you so much. Sorry that it had to be such a short episode, but
we will catch up.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. That was, super informative for everyone. And I also got a lot out of it. So
my pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks very much.